Welcome to Aromatic Chat, the podcast that introduces you to registered clinical and certified aromatherapists around the world. Every other week, my Mima sits down with a different aromatherapist to learn about their aromatic journey and how they use their plants that God has given us in their lives and their businesses. Aromatic Chat is produced by Lemon Balm Coaching, and your host is my Mima, Melissa. She is a master transformational coach and a registered aromatherapist.
Hey friends, welcome to episode number 82, Aromatic Chat with Zoe Pichot. Zoe is a registered aromatherapist and a budding herbalist. She was born and raised on a domain of aromatic plants in the south of France. She is blessed to have a legacy of aromatics in her family, and she developed an intimate connection to plants, flowers, and the energy of the forest early on. There is so much more to share, and I want you to hear it all from her, so let's get started. Zoe, I am really thankful that you said yes to being on Aromatic Chat. I had an opportunity to speak with you back in February of this year for the AIA conference, and it was just a pleasure to speak with you then. And I'm so thankful that we have this opportunity to get together so that we can hear your aromatic story.
Thank you so much for having me and thinking of me.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and just dive right in. I love our journeys because none of them are straight lines, right? So I would love to hear how you ended up here as an aromatherapist.
Yeah, well, my journey is really my life, actually, because I don't know what life is without aromatherapy or plant medicine or essential oils, because I was born and raised in the south of France on a domain of aromatic plants where we had a distillery, and my parents evolved and kind of got into aromatherapy and essential oils before it was really popular yet. And so I really grew up in that environment. And so be it with the plants around me, aromatic plants, and the forest obviously were really part of my community, let's say, growing up. And then be it aromatherapy and really herbalism, all kinds of holistic healings with my mother, who's Lorrie Hargis. And then my father, Jean-Claude Pichot, who is the founder of Gojamal, a essential oil hydrosol trading company in the south of France. And so where my father was really doing business and really got into the industry of essential oils after doing a lot of distillation. He created one of the first portable distilleries in Aveyron, south of France also, but different parts where they would go distill at the farmers' places directly. And so anyway, so I can't imagine what life would be without it. And there's no like before or after being introduced to essential oils. It's just like they were there all around me. And so as a child, it was really great because I was able to firsthand experience their benefits, and that without any kind of placebo effects or any beliefs, because I wasn't indoctrinated into thinking this is the way that medicine is and it shouldn't be any other way. I really just saw that what my mother was giving me was for my greatest good and would help me to be able to feel better when I got sick. And also, I think very early on, since my parents were just talking about it constantly, and so it was really in my family circle, smelling was a huge thing. We love cooking, and so we really gather around aromas, and so around smells and olfactions. And so I was trained, my nose was constantly trained, and then going to conferences and going to big seminars and things like that. I went everywhere with my parents around the world, discovering different smells. And so I just really had developed a flair for it. And then I also, when I went to high school, I did an international Anglo-American section to also, since I was living in France, develop my Anglo-American culture. And so I love liberal arts. And so I started doing very classical studies, in fact, while I was passing my aromatherapy registration. And then decided to put that on hold, the more academic, classic studies, to really, it just seemed obvious at some points that, oh, I want to be closer to the plants and I want to make aromatherapy and herbalism the main thing I do, because in a lot of my spare time, I'm going to be giving my friends advice. I'm constantly, when people are sick around me, like, oh, do you, how do you heal yourself? Like, what are your tools? Like, do you want tools? How can we make this easier? Because I see a lot of my friends, especially young people, who just don't know what to do when they're sick and who just suffer, kind of with not a lot of like accessible tools.
Right.
And so then that's how I'm here today.
That's really great because I think of kids, right? And when we grow up in a family that's so immersed in a culture, so many kids say, not for me, I don't want to do it. Did you ever have that moment where you're like, I don't think so, mom and dad, I think I want to try this other thing instead?
Well, I think that my parents never like pushed me to go into that. And my father, I think, definitely did not want me to actually do this. He really wanted
That's
me to do
funny.
classical studies, because he didn't go to college, and just kind of succeeded from his hard work and really his knack for that industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so he really, since I've always been brilliant in school, really pushed me, okay, you are the person in the family who's going to go to college, who's going to get a higher education that is going to be like, I was in a very elitist thing. It's very different in France, also the system and everything. Um, and my mom is just great because she's always been like, follow your dreams, like I'll support you, whatever it will be, even if it seems impossible. That's very much how she is, and I'm so grateful for that. Even like the teenage years where you kind of push away from your family because you have to develop your own self,
Right.
I was still connected to essential oils and still connected to plants because my connection to them isn't only through my family. It's also an intimate connection that I have with them. And so it's not governed by my relationship to my parents.
Yeah. I loved that you said earlier, you said the forest is part of your community, which told me that your connection is genuine. It's not like, oh, I'm doing this just because that's all I've ever known. Like the forest is part of your community, which I just think that's a really beautiful way to state your connection to plants, that it's a community.
Yeah, it's something that I'm kind of developing and kind of putting more consciousness on more and more these days, of how non-human beings are also part of community and that I'm communing with them constantly. There's this anthropologist, Descola, French anthropologist, who really did some groundbreaking work that basically says that our distinction between nature and culture is completely occidental and doesn't make any more sense. And so that we should abolish it and we change the way that we live and our relationship to the things around us if we can change that vision. And so there's a lot of, like, for example, land defenders in Notre-Dame-des-Landes, for example, in the north of France, who defended this land against the building of an airport, and who said, we're not defending nature, we're nature defending itself. And that's something that I really love. And I realize now I actually grew up very isolated because we were the only house at the end of a road where it's the end of the road, only forest around us, 3 kilometers from a village of 200 people.
Mm-hmm.
And so extremely isolated. So I can have friends coming up, and saying, oh, let's go play or whatever. It wasn't that simple, let's say, to have social interaction. Like, it demanded effort to take the car or to ride a bike. So now I realize that, yes, the forest, the plants around me, I spent so much time outside by myself that they were truly pillars of my community.
I'm curious, like, what is it that people come to you for aromatherapy? I know you're also practicing herbalism or studying herbalism. But like when clients come to you, what is it that they're coming to you for? Like, what is your specialty?
I'd say now for almost a year, I've been working with a lot of people who want to quit smoking,
Mm.
mostly tobacco and cannabis. So that codependency, and it's been really interesting. Well, I've also put out there that that's what I want to work on because that's what I wrote my research paper on to pass my registration last year. And so that's when I really dove deep into it and found it to be just so intricate and so interesting, and that I see that there's a real potential for olfaction and aromatherapy to help with smoking cessation and just SUDs in general. So like substance use disorders, addictions, um, and if not, so that's pretty particular, but I've been working with about like 6 people, I'd say, that we always come to their desired results. Sometimes it's not stopping smoking completely, but becoming a little bit more comfortable, less dependent, and just finding more, it's really a lot of emotional regulation
I was
and
actually
just
going to ask, like, what is the process? Because that's not an easy thing. My mom was a smoker her whole life up until the day she couldn't, up until the day she didn't wake up. She was a smoker her
mm,
whole life. So I'm just curious about that process. How do you help them with their cessation?
um so I help them by giving them a new tool and by giving them also information about what is really their disorder. Because
Mm.
like people might want to stop smoking, but they don't necessarily actually know how it works in the brain or see it as a brain disorder. Like we see it very much as a psychological disorder. And so people can feel a lot of guilt with relapsing, feel like they have no willpower. And so it's really to be there and build people up from where they are, and not try to like tear down to then like build them back up. And it demands a lot of patience, and that it's not linear, I have to say, and it's also extremely subjective. Well, really, of course, like aromatherapy, we want to tailor to each client and be in that holistic optic, but it's so intricate because it's about their relationship with themselves, and their emotions, and so how they're going to deal with their emotions, kind of peeling all of the layers off of that and seeing like what is the root cause of this. And so sometimes it's going, and I think that's what I like the most, is trying to create that real intimate space where people can finally open up. And I feel though like, in fact, with the smoking cessation clients, it's harder. It takes more time to develop that. It takes a lot of trust. I mean, it might seem very obvious, but I can start working with a client and be like, okay, like I'll call you next week. We have an appointment next week or something, and they stop answering or they stop showing or things like that, where it demands a lot of attention and just I'm constantly learning. And so I'm also learning um, a lot more about emotionally supporting these
Mm.
people because that's most of it. What's great though is that I can explain the science to them. Why can this essential oil and why can olfaction help them? So that way it doesn't just stay woo woo. And so it can seem tangible.
Mhm.
And so they can then like put consciousness on what's going on inside of them. What's great with essential oils, just I think in that case, is that they can help us then deal with our emotions, go and reroute parts of our brain, but also work for all of the physical ailments that we're going to get with the withdrawal symptoms. And so that I have clients that the essential oils are really going to help them with their cravings,
Mhm.
like food cravings, that come up, especially when you stop smoking tobacco. The food cravings can be really intense. The first client I had, actually, I started treating him and working with him when he had stopped smoking. It was like the second to third week. So that's when it gets the most intense with cannabis. And so he had sweats,
Mm.
fever, nausea, all of that. And so where I came and massaged him and worked really on the physical body. And they're so versatile, that it's truly a blessing.
That's amazing. And I don't know, it depends on who you talk to in the US, I think. Like if smoking gets a bad name or if it's just something that we gloss over and pretend it's not an issue. So I don't know what it's like in France. and why are people seeking you out? Because I don't see that happening much here in the US, but it might just be that I'm not around that,
Mm.
the community of smokers.
Yeah, it's a very different relationship to smoking tobacco, especially in France and in the US. In France, people smoke a lot.
Mm.
Like, and that's kind of, I feel like, the vision that Americans have of Europe is that we do smoke a lot. You know, we sit out in cafes and smoke cigarettes and drink coffee, which
With a
is true.
beret and a scarf.
Totally true. And your baguettes. And people like you're like legal age is 18. Everything in France is 18. We don't have 21 anymore. And so but it's really easy just to buy cigarettes. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can be 14, 15 and buy cigarettes. There's no carding, there's no problem. Same with like alcohol, basically. So we're still very much attached to that. And so it's it's extremely common. Like for example, when I went to high school, I was far away from home, so I slept in a dormitory during the week in dorms, and we had a cigarette break at night when we were minors.
Mm-hmm.
But because minors were already so addicted at that point that they
Right.
had to give us one for people to not smoke. Like they were like, we better just do it because if not, everyone's smoking in their rooms and we can have that.
Right.
And but it's still how you say it's more seen as a problem than alcohol is,
Mm.
I would have to say, because people like are conscious of what it does. Like you are like people talk about it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And you know on our tobacco packets now, cigarette packets, there's pictures of, you know, like what it can do to you. Like we have that kind of propaganda. That way it starts like each time you go to take one, you see the like blackened lungs or you see this person on a
Right.
respirator. But we really have the culture of smoking cannabis and tobacco together. Which for example in the US, I feel like it's a lot time more just smoking cannabis on its own.
Right.
And that, I feel like when I go to Los Angeles, like people won't look at you weirdly if you smoke a blunt in the streets, but they will if you smoke a cigarette. And I
Mm.
think that's so interesting because cannabis is not legal also in France. That's something that you have to know. And so there's a lot of restriction on cannabis users by the government. And but so many people, we're one of the European countries that consumes the most cannabis.
Mm.
And what's so interesting is tobacco is really like the most disgusting product ever when smoked. Everyone when they're small, when their parents smoke, they're gonna say, I won't ever smoke. It's gross. First time you smoke, you're gonna say, Blech, I don't like this. Why would anyone do this? But it's so highly addictive
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
that's where, and it's a business, basically. It's a huge business.
Big
So you
business.
have huge business. And so I know now I've been hearing about this also, is that in fact, if you want to be, that it's also like a political line now to be like, oh, I'm going to stop smoking cigarettes to be more in political alignment with what I believe.
Hmm.
And that could get a lot of people who smoke and who the like scientific medical reasons for their health they don't really care about, like it can't get them to stop because you need
Right.
that motivation. And so I'd say the people who come to me, it's that they feel that their consumption, they're too dependent on it. And so the link to their consumption is too intense and they can see that there's parts of their lives that make it where they can't show up anymore the
Mm.
way they would like to. And that also they're using it a lot of times as a crutch also. So where there's going to be like anger issues, where there's going to be like unresolved traumas, and just the fact that I think a lot of people don't know how to rest and relax. And so, like, cigarette breaks, the only thing that's ever been given to them.
Right.
I have to say, I do treat mostly women, mothers, so who do like find the relaxation, find like the time for themselves only through their cigarette or their joint. And so it's all about that's how aromatherapy can help us find more ease, and take that time for ourselves to breathe deeply, to be in our body, and to be present.
I mean, just wow, because I don't know of anybody who is really approaching smoking the way that you're approaching it. I've heard of other aromatherapists who it's kind of something that they do as part of their aromatherapy, but it seems to me that you've really taken this and you're really running with it, researching and showing up in a way that I haven't heard of really anybody showing up before. So, wow.
Thank you.
I'm curious what inspired you to go down this route?
What inspired me is that I worked on a lot of physical ailments for like the first year and a half, let's say. And I've always been so passionate about the intricate connections between our emotional body and our physical body and how we can't actually see them as separate. And so I wanted to work on something with a little bit more, how you say, more ethereal, more invisible, less tangible. And it's really this, a friend of mine, her boyfriend reached out to me because I said, oh, I had to do my last case study. And so I said, oh, if there's anybody who's, interested, I'm open to work with about anything. And so he reached out to me and needed help at that time when he was going through the smoking cessation while trying on his own already and had already tried a lot of other modalities.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it was just kind of the click of like, this makes a lot of sense to me. And I feel like there's a big gap in that area. And especially for young people, like, I don't actually really know, like you can sometimes find, like phone numbers that are written in like certain social places
Mm-hmm.
of like, if you want to stop smoking, like call this number or whatever. But I'm not like, I was never educated on, where to go, like how does it work when you're dealing with an addiction really in France.
Right.
Obviously there's rehab centers, there's detoxification centers, but truly what kind of support systems do we have for this? And since smoking is so common and that so many people around me do smoke and in the circles that I am in, and that I feel like I always see what it's hiding, like the unease and the unhappiness that it can be hiding, and the social angst or existential angst, that I was really like, okay, I think I really want to go and study this and see what's possible. And then I think also the fact that there's not that much research on it. And in fact, there's no research on the codependency. So the use of olfaction or aromatherapy for cannabis and tobacco smoking cessation. Also, I was like, okay, I want to go deeper into this. And one of my next goals is I'd really like to open groups. So we're groups of people and to work so more in community and really create that support network and not just be only on the one-on-one. And I think that would be really beautiful.
I was actually going to ask you is this just one-on-one or is in a group setting? So that's awesome. Oh my gosh, because you can reach so many more people, obviously, if you do a group settings. That's really amazing, Zoe.
Thanks.
I
Yeah,
don't
and I'd
know
also
I
like
don't know if you realize how amazing it is because you're in it, you're doing it, you're just like, I'm just doing the work, but really I've not heard of anybody, and that doesn't mean there isn't, but I just haven't heard of anybody else doing what you're doing with smoking cessation. And it is dear to me because, my mom smoked her whole life and passed away from all the complications of smoking. So I'm really amazed. I'm really amazed. That's amazing. That's awesome. I'm curious if you have any other hobbies outside of aromatherapy and herbalism, because you seem pretty entrenched.
I actually have way too many hobbies. And I don't. So it's really hard for me to like organize my time and my free time and what do I want to like really master and develop. My newest hobby has been basket weaving.
Mm,
Um, and basket weaving with like we call it like wild rustic. So I learned a certain technique from Corsica, and where basically also we make interesting shapes where we use all of the essence, and we don't like work them too much. Well, like we don't like sort them, like it's not like perfect size, we don't cut them or anything like that, and where you can really use anything,
very
not
cool.
just wood. wicker, which is willow, actually, tree, salix. And so that's been actually just great to just be like, oh, I can go out in the forest and I can like make myself a bowl, or like I can make myself like, and just like being able to like do something manual that like makes sense. And that is like hard also. And I just, yeah, I really love that. If not, I write a lot and I do slam poetry. So that's something also I do. I've been organizing like how you say, writing workshops.
Very cool.
Um, yeah, around poetry, and so I also perform, but even though that's like very much on the back burner right now. And if not, yeah, dancing. I love folk dancing. Like that one-on-one connection and group connection also is really great. And I'm also very politically active, and so very into land defending, those things in France. And yeah, connecting and seeing everything that I can do and the connections that I can create in this territory. And I'm getting more and more attached to the place where I grew up, at least the region.
That's really cool. You sound like a really fun person to hang out with.
Thanks. And not fun all the time. I can be serious, but
Yeah, but fun, we have to enjoy the things that we do, or what's the point in doing them?
oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So the mission of Aromatic Chat is for people to be able to find you and connect with you in the work that you're doing. How can people find you?
People can find me through the Lorrie Hargis International School of Aromatherapy, because I'm the public relations manager. So basically Instagram, TikTok now. Also, I just created the TikTok account like 2 days ago. It's Lorrie Hargis Aromatherapy. And so you can contact me directly through there, because I basically do all of Lori's social media. I don't have my own social media platform, but I'm also contactable through Facebook on my own profile, or by email.
Beautiful. And what are you working on right now that's got you really excited? And it doesn't have to be aromatherapy related. Just like, what are you as a person, what are you working on that you're excited about right now?
Well, right now I'm really studying for my exams in herbalism. And so I'm doing a lot of botanical outings, and that's just so exciting. Participating in like botanical study groups. And so just seeing like the diversity of plants and all of their different usages. And I think just learning more and more about indicating, I don't know how you would say that in English, but like plants that basically indicate things in our soil.
Mhm.
And I just recently started learning about how also the soil, like what they indicate in the soil, is also probably what they can be good for our bodies and for our soil. And so if you have a plant growing in your garden, maybe it's for a reason. And especially if you're attached, to the ground that you're on. And that is just so fascinating. And it makes so much sense. Like suddenly I just like assisted like some conferences. There's this botanist in France, Gérard Dussert, who has really been a huge innovator for the last like 20 years in that department. Yeah, just loving that. And also wild orchids are flowering. And I'm in actually one of the regions in France. So in the Aude, which is southwest France. We're right on the border of Spain, the Pyrenees. The main city is Carcassonne, which a lot of people know from the board game and also virtual game that it became of this medieval city. Anyway, and so we have some of the most wild orchids, and some very particular ones that people come from all around France or even internationally to see bloom specifically. And so where I grew up, I remember I spent the first lockdown in 2020 just like studying wild orchids, but I didn't have like a lot of botanical keys. So I was just like observing and sitting with them, and then I made flower essences from them also. And so now I'm like in botanical groups where there's like other people that are just like passionate about them. And what I love too is that passion that people have, even though like they don't have like medicinal properties.
Mhm.
And it's just really this fascination for um really just the flower, the plants.
That's cool. And I love the idea of what is in the plant is what your body needs. Um, it's so true. And when you think about how the whole world was designed, right? the plants were here before we were here. The plants have the things that we need. The soil has what we need. That's really cool. And I love the fact that during the lockdown, you just went outside and sat with the plants. I just think that's really cool. Because how many people just sat in their houses staring at, the TV, and you went outside and communed?
Yeah, my lockdown was honestly the best. That was a big game changer in my life, to be able to spend 2 months in the place where I grew up, just like almost by myself, and just being back in the forest like when I was a child.
That's really cool. Well, as we come to a close, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share whatever else might be on your mind. If you have any words that you'd like to leave the listeners with, or maybe one of your poems or anything.
Thank you. Oh, I don't really have a poem that I could share, but yeah, I think I just really like to say, if you have the opportunity, get outside and get to know the indigenous plants that grow around you. And especially if you do use a lot of essential oils, but essential oils that aren't indigenous to where you're from, start learning about the plants that are around you, and talk to like the older people, the people who safeguard the knowledge in your neighborhood, to discover what secrets might be hidden behind those plants or their like popular uses locally. It's really so valuable. And then there's this quote that I wanted to share by Thierry Thévenant, who is a very, very popular botanist and medicinal plant grower, let's say, in France, who's done a lot of very cool things, who's friends with my dad, and who says, "I believe that foraging or gathering is a primordial activity which can guarantee the preservation of our profound humanity. It invites us unavoidably at some time or another to reflect, respect the natural balances, and to learn and discover the laws of life."
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Zoe.
You're very welcome.
I appreciate you coming on to Aromatic Chat, and I'll share all of your links in the show notes so that people know how to get in touch with you.
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay. So can I just say that I love my podcast? Is that okay? And it's not because of anything that I do, but it's the caliber of the people that I have the privilege and honor to speak with, like today's guest, Zoe Pichot. Zoe is a rare find. The majority of aromatherapists that I've been around are quite a bit older than Zoe, but here she is showing up in her community and with her friends, encouraging them to use natural medicines to heal themselves. Not only that, but she has taken on this amazing niche of helping people quit smoking. Like I said in our interview, my mom passed away from the complications of smoking. She always said to us when we would ask her to quit that she didn't have cancer, so why bother? Well, she never developed cancer, but she did have emphysema, COPD, asthma, and chronic bronchitis. She was addicted in every sense of the word. She would remove her oxygen to light up a cigarette. She smoked until the morning that she didn't wake up. Zoe, once again, I want to say wow, and thank you for the work that you're doing. What if our beloved aromatics, along with someone like Zoe who understands addiction and the lack of community that people struggling with addiction have, can blaze this trail to help the masses overcome? How amazing would that be? If you or someone you know is trying to stop smoking, I encourage you to reach out to Zoe, and I will include all of the links mentioned in today's episode in the show notes. Every time you listen and share and review the podcast, you're supporting the mission of Aromatic Chat to connect people with the aromatherapist that meets their wellness needs. Aromatic Chat is produced by Lemon Balm Coaching, and I'm your host, Melissa, Master Transformational Coach and Registered Aromatherapist. I help strong but exhausted women in their 40s to 60s reconnect with their body and emotions and reignite their well-being in just 4 to 6 months without heavy lifestyle restrictions, fruitless doctor's visits, or sacrificing their relationships. I do this through helping them reconnect with their inner wisdom and address the root cause of their issues instead of constantly tackling symptoms, so that they can realign their mind, body, and spirit and heal from the inside out. If that sounds like you or someone you know, I invite you to connect with me on the web at lemonbalmcoaching.com or Instagram at lemonbalmcoaching. I will see you next time with our next episode. Until then, peace, love, and aromatics.